Relationship, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and vulnerable narcissism. The obsession with flaws. Do you constantly doubt your relationship? It might be more than just overthinking. Now, relationship OCD is a type of obsessive-compulsive disorder where a person experiencing ongoing doubts, fears, and compulsions related to their romantic relationship. Now, these intrusive thoughts, they can cause distress and make the person consistently question their feelings, their partner's feelings, or the relationship rightness. Does this kind of ring true for you? Is it kind of resonating? Now, common signs include doubting feelings. Do I really love my partner? Could also be obsessing over flaws. What if they're not attractive, smart, or even funny enough? Or it could be comparing to others. Do other couples seem happier than we do? And it's also seeking reassurance, constantly asking friends or the partner, are we really meant to be? Now, compulsive checking comes into play, and this is the OCD part, which is rereading texts, analyzing past interactions for signs of a problem. And that's what's a little different. A lot of this sort of rings of some borderline personality disorder traits, the doubting feelings, obsessive flaws, focus, comparing to others, seeking reassurance. These are really common BPD behaviors. But when we add in compulsive checking, that's what kind of changes things a little bit. Let's look at the example of Alex and Jordan. And Alex and Jordan, they've been dating for about a year, but Alex keeps thinking, what if Jordan isn't the one? Even though they're happy together, Alex replays every disagreement and compares Jordan to past partners and asks friends, do you think I really love them? No matter how much reassurance Alex gets, the doubts always come back, causing anxiety and making it hard to enjoy the relationship. And that's that OCD component, leads to compulsive reassurance seeking. And that adds to the sense of relationship distress. Are they really the one? Or am I just trying to convince myself? It's this, you're stuck in between. Could it be? Could it be? Might it be? I'm going to try this. Maybe this will make me feel better. This might work. How could this? It's a lot of what's called counterfactual thinking and analysis. You're always looking at the other side or another component, but it becomes compulsive and you almost feel consumed by it. For relationship OCD, this centers around your relationship. Now, what about the role of vulnerable narcissism? How does that factor in? Well, this is that vulnerable narcissists often tie self-worth to their partner's perceived value. And that's the narcissistic component, is that their sense of self-worth, which is often broken, tends to be very low. They tend to overly focus on negative aspects of self. They tend to overly criticize themselves. They tend to, anything that's positive, they tend to see things as a lose-lose situation. That positive experience, that's just a one-off. That's just a mistake. Vulnerable narcissism. So they use that sense of brokenness and that vulnerability in order to get attention. And that attention feeds their sense of brokenness to get more attention. And that's the vulnerable narcissism component. And in this video, what we're talking about is that vulnerable narcissism, how it ties to self-worth, to their partner's perceived value. Are they pretty enough? Are they wealthy enough? Are they funny enough? Do they do these things in order to be good enough or compensate, in some cases, for my internalized perceived failures or brokenness? But are they also, bring in seats to the show, right? Meaning that, are they garnering enough attention? Am I getting that narcissism sense or fulfillment out of being with this person? And that's really complicated, because in those instances, what's happening is that narcissism is never filled. It'll never be filled, because it's based on irrationality and distortion. So because of the irrationality and the distortion, how can you ever feel broken enough to get enough attention that you want to validate your brokenness so you'll be seen and heard and feel important even though you feel broken? And if that doesn't make any sense, that's because Vulnerable narcissism is very complex and very confusing, and it is very paradoxical, which is just like in the example that I just explained. And a lot of times we'll see in that vulnerable narcissist that it's this fear of imperfection ends up fueling a lot of those obsessive doubts and distress. For example, if my partner isn't perfect, what does that say about me? So see, what you're doing is you're saying, well, if you're not perfect, then that obviously illustrates my sense of imperfection, but I also have a narcissistic need to be seen. So again, we're going to go back to that paradoxical cycle that really never gets fulfilled, because it's always draining itself and never really filling itself. So if you notice this in your relationships, well, what can you do? But how can you break that cycle? So first and foremost, and we're going to talk about 3 components here, is recognizing the patterns. Your doubts may not reflect reality. You have to look at your relationship with authentic lenses, with a reality-based lens, seeing the relationship for what it is. Every relationship has good and bad. What we want to do is we want to have a greater good as opposed to a greater bad, right? So we want to have more good instances as opposed to bad ones. Now, what you define a good instance, that's going to be up to you. A good instance for me, for example, would be that we get along, that we listen to each other, that we're patient with each other, that we help each other. And even when you're giving feedback, it's not taken as an attack, or that, you're not validating me. Remember, validation isn't agreeing with the person. Validation is about hearing the person, recognizing what they're saying, but you don't have to agree with it. Those are 2 different things. They're often confused, but they're not the same thing. So that recognizing the pattern, it's that your doubts may not reflect reality. Bring reality into your relationship. Now, detach your self-worth. Your value isn't tied to your partner. You have to separate that. As pretty, funny, smart as my partner is, that equates to how pretty, smart, and funny I am. You have to separate those things. You're not being fair to the other person. And in a lot of times, you're using them in order for them to fulfill gaps that maybe you don't have, that you wish you did have. And that can be really problematic. Now, a mental health provider can absolutely help you work on that. If there are components of narcissism, typically means that there'll be longer treatment, and there'll be a greater sense of building insight, building recognition into that narcissistic, vulnerable narcissistic, in this case, narcissistic self-fulfilling prophecy, but also the obsessive-compulsive components in the relationship. So looking at those things, but you got to detach that self-worth. You got to. Because if your self-worth is attached to another human being like your partner, it's all externalized. And the idea in mental health treatment, what we want to do is we want to make it internalized. So you have control over it, because the more power and control you have, the more decisions you can make. And the more decisions you make based on a balanced perspective, the greater the probability of positive outcome. And the last component is to tolerate uncertainty. Love isn't about finding perfection. It's about finding the right fit for you. So many times we develop this idealized concept of who and what our partner is supposed to be. And interestingly, when I've worked with people that have had that conceptualization, we say, okay, well, let's break it down. Let's break down the metrics of this idealized other. A lot of times it's like, well, I don't know. I'll just know it when I feel it. Whoa. You don't want to do that, because that means that you're always going to be ill-defined when you're looking for that perfect partner. So the odds of you finding that perfect partner is pretty low. So you want to work on defining what those metrics are. What's a good fit for you? Could it be intelligence? Could it be funny? Could it be tolerance? Could it be patience? Could it be several of those? What are they? And remember, they all don't have to be 100%. Some are going to be stronger than others, and some aren't going to be that great. Maybe they're kind of funny. Kind of funny is good if you're okay with that, right? They could be kind of smart. Maybe they're not book smart. Maybe they're more very constructive. They can build things and fix things. Not that those people aren't smart, but you know what I mean? The different skills relate that you find attractive, that you're like, hey, yeah, I want to be able to do that. That's awesome. Absolutely. So it's finding that good fit, that right fit for you. And it's tough. Let's just review real quick, right? You want to recognize the pattern, detach that self-worth, and tolerate uncertainty. And I do. I absolutely understand that it's difficult, easy to say, hard to do, but not impossible. Real love is built on connection, not obsession. And we have to embrace that. Now, you add that vulnerable narcissistic component, and it absolutely complicates issues, particularly when you start to see this relationship OCD coming up as well. These compulsions, this anxiety, this drive, this need for this perfection and perceptive perfection outcome. It's very problematic, adds to deterioration of the relationship in most cases. But try those three things. Try using them as best you can. Leave them in the comments. Let other people know, because people do benefit from other people's insight and adding to those comments. So please do that. It's really helpful to a lot of people. And also, if you've struggled or overcome obsessive relationship doubts, how did you do that? Do you think that you had relationship obsessive compulsive disorder? If so, how did you find out if you did or if you didn't? What did you do to manage it? It could really help a lot of people. And I really appreciate it. Hope this helped you. And I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.